measure, learn, apply, and adjust. And the idea of that is that we're measuring things objectively that impact our cognitive and mental health or that of people that we're serving. We're learning what the very best research has to say about those things. We're applying what we've learned, and then we're remeasuring and we're adjusting. And sometimes as we do that, people ask, well, what can I expect from this? What are the long term benefits of this? And one of the great things about the fact that A Mind for All Seasons is getting close to 10 years old is that we have a lot more experience than we did early on. And we have a lot more data and a lot more case studies that we can actually talk about, and many more people who have followed that process of measure, learn, apply, adjust over and over for a few iterations. And so today, Randy and I are going to walk you through a case study for an actual client who we've worked with for well over a year. And we want you to see exactly what has happened to his cognitive scores. And we'll talk about the kinds of things that were adjusted along the way and what is likely contributing to that. So, Randy has been traveling out of state, but I'm so grateful that he can be here with us. But I am going to do the sharing of the screen right now because when you're on your phone, you never know what's going to happen with the cell phone connection. So let me pull up an example report that Randy's put together for us to review. And I'm going to increase the size just a little bit. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. And Randy, I'm going to let you kind of talk us through some things here because you've really studied out this case and there are definite points that you wanted to identify.
Yes, thank you. As Eric says, I'm traveling. I'm in the Salt Lake area today, chasing my own vision health. I have keratoconus, and so I come down and see a doctor periodically. And so my schedule is always dependent on her schedule. So I get to do this from my automobile. Thanks for your patience. Eric talked about learning and measuring, then adjusting and applying all of these challenges that people have when it comes to cognitive testing. And I thought this was such a valuable opportunity to share an example of a client who's been with us for 18 months. And clients that join A Mind for All Seasons join at different levels of participation. Some people just join our little membership program where you're all here today and they can come to office hours and participate in these mini classes. Other people order lab work and a roadmap, and still some ordered telemedicine. And Eric and I were talking through a case this morning of a young man who joined our service that's had a number of head injuries. And I made the comment to Eric, one of the challenges of our service is that when we measure biomarkers, we're looking for deficits. We're looking for problems that fall outside of the normal ranges. Well, often when you're my age, I'm in my mid-50s, when you're in your mid-50s, your physiology changes over time. But when we're working with really young people, their physiology is so plastic, meaning that they don't manifest a lot of physiological changes in their lab work, even though they might have many symptoms. Those are individuals where telemedicine makes a difference. This person that I'm going to share with you today he's in his early 40s. And he joined our service back in March of 2024, and he did cognitive testing. So I'm going to point out just a really simple, you don't have to understand cognitive testing at a deep level to recognize what's happening in this graph. You'll see that this test took him about 40 minutes to complete, and 50% of his markers are listed as above average, and 50% of his markers are listed in the average range. So this is a very typical 40-year-old individual, 41 at the time that they did this testing, where he was saying, I want to make sure my brain health is good. I feel like some things are not right. So here's my baseline testing. So just take a mental snapshot, 50-50 normal, or 50-50 average, above average.
Note that his neurocognition index, which is kind of an amalgamation of all the scores, was in the 68th percentile. So that's a pretty good baseline number to just keep in the back of your mind while we go through this.
So he took the test after 6 months of participating in the interventions we recommend. Many of these interventions are optimizing nutrient levels through supplements. Many of the interventions are lifestyle changes where we ask people, hey, could you be a little bit more intentional about your diet, more intentional about your exercise? Could you back off the use of alcohol? Because sometimes people will get a nightcap. This individual does not use alcohol heavy at any level, but there was some suspicion that maybe that contributed. So we made some of these recommendations, and 6 months later, he does this testing. And as you can see, where he was 50-50 average, above average, now he's about 75% of his markers are in the above average category. And if you look at that neurocognitive index that Eric pointed out before, he went from the 68th percentile to the 88th percentile. That's pretty cool. That's evidence that the things that we are doing has made his brain healthier. Now, this is an executive. This is a high-level business individual who commands an army of employees, right? He wants to protect his brain. He recognizes the capital that he peddles in is cognitive capital. That's how he generates his revenue. That's how he grows his business. So he's making progress. Well, we encouraged him to continue through telemedicine. We made some fine-tune adjustments. Eric participated in telemedicine. I participated in telemedicine. We're each giving feedback along the way about things that he can do to make his life a little bit better. Eric, go to the next one. He just completed this cognitive test in July of 2025. So now it's been 18 months. And you'll see that all but 2 parameters have shifted into the above average category. When you look at his neurocognitive index percentile, he started in the 68th, then he moved to the 88th percentile. Now he's functioning at the 99th percentile. That means that every individual in his age group that takes this test, he scores better than 99% of the individuals taking this neurocognitive test. Now, lest you think that I'm padding the numbers a little bit and I'm having him take some proprietary exam, this test has been administered about 20 million times, and it was developed at Stanford University. So this is a insurance-validated, high-quality examination for neurocognitive index, and this guy's kicking butt and taking names, right? He's gone from the 68th to the 99th percentile. What did we do? It's the same things that we ask you to do. We personalize those interventions based on his history, his lab work, and if you do telemedicine, we're able to dig a little bit deeper on how we personalize things based on symptoms that you might experience that are not captured by neurocognitive testing. Eric, would you add anything to that?
No, I think this is just a really good example of what a diligent effort looks like in terms of outcomes that are measurable. And part of what I want you all to start thinking about as we go through this is something that I've heard Randy say 1,000 times, which is do not let the desire for perfection get in the way of a really good effort. And you're going to see in this client's blood work, he's not perfect at everything. You don't have to be 100% perfect at everything to have really good results. The beauty of a multimodal approach is that it's never about one thing. It's about moving things forward in measurable ways across the board and optimizing the human system. So you'll see that as we go through this blood work.
Eric, go ahead and scroll down to where we get to his genetics. The last thing I want to point out is we didn't go from the 68th to the 99th percentile in 3 months. We went there in 18 months, and this guy did testing after 6 months and then after a year, but has persisted in doing the interventions. And so it's kind of like, for some reason in my local primary care, I have a lot of people that are in the fitness world that come and say, Randy, I want to do a Spartan or a marathon or a bodybuilding show. Can you help me prepare? Many individuals want to change very, very quickly. They want to go from couch potato to an Ironman in 3 months. And the reality is, if you just give yourself a little bit of time and a little bit of grace to work through these things, you do so well and you make changes. One thing I highlight is this individual has one of the genes that is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. If all you look at are statistics, statistically, this individual has somewhere between 2 and 3 times greater risk of Alzheimer's disease based purely on genetics. That's the same gene type that I have. This is part of the reason I've become very interested in this part of medical science. And what I've done throughout this roadmap is I've tracked his progress. So his glutathione level was 215. It's been as low as 194 and as high as 249. So we're functioning within that range. That helps us have some predictor of his ability to tolerate oxidative stress. And so then we've recommended keep doing some of these supplements. My gosh, it's working because you're doing so well. We increased his neurocognitive index by 30%. That's unbelievable. Okay, if we scroll down to the next one, about 30 to 50% of the population has the genetics called the MTHFR. Some people affectionately refer to this as the mother effer gene. And this genetic profile makes you less likely to be able to utilize B vitamins. Well, everyone takes a B vitamin. The whole world takes a B complex. If you have a certain genetic profile, maybe the B complex that you buy at your local Sam's Club is insufficient for your needs. And here's why. Look below his MTHFR genetics under homocysteine. When we first started working with him, his previous level started at 12.8, and then it dropped to 10, and then it dropped to 8.4. This individual has had a 20% improvement in his homocysteine over every 6 months, essentially. He's gotten 40% better. You cannot have good brain health if you're running around with a homocysteine level of 12. You can't have good cardiovascular health. This is, as predictor, a risk factor for heart disease as your total cholesterol level. But for some reason, we don't track it in cardiology. I just lectured in San Diego to a group of healthcare professionals, doctors, naturopaths, chiropractors, and my whole message was preventive cardiology. We have to be able to look beyond cholesterol at different markers of cardiovascular risk, and this is one of them. The way you lower homocysteine starts with having a very intentional methylated B vitamin that drives those levels up. And the one thing I want to point out is he started with a folic acid level of 5. A folic acid level of 5 is a brain damage level. If a woman had this level of folic acid at the time of pregnancy, the risk of neural tube defects in that developing fetus double or triple. We don't stop needing a high level of folic acid after pregnancy. We need it throughout the lifetime to protect our brain. And so this guy basically quadrupled his folic acid level, put it in the upper thresholds of excellent, if you will, using methylated B vitamins, and as a result, dropped his homocysteine level not quite in half, but pretty close. That's unbelievable. So we've recommended that he continue using that supplement. And people always ask me, Randy, how long do I take these supplements? And my response was, well, only as long as you want to feel good. As soon as you want to stop feeling great, go ahead and stop taking those supplements, because we've shown that from a biomarker standpoint, he's gotten better. Why would you stop doing that? Research shows that about 86% of individuals take nutritional supplements. And I would say that a smaller percentage of those people are very intentional about it. They don't really understand, I'm taking this for this particular reason, and I'm intentionally taking this supplement for this reason. That's the benefit of what the enhanced protocol does, is we will help you match those to your genetics and to your lab value, so you're taking something that actually can make a big difference. Okay, going on to vitamin D. We learned during the pandemic how stinking important vitamin D was, because it's a transcription marker. It changes the way your genes are expressed, and it amplifies your immune system in a positive way. I should say that it modulates your immune system. It doesn't just turn it on. If you have autoimmunity and you amplify your immune system, that could not be such a good thing. Modulate means that it balances out and it strengthens in the direction that needs to be strengthened. And his vitamin D level went from 21, which is not good, to 88 to now 71. My recommendation is that he float around between that 70 and 90 range for the rest of his life. Should he stop taking vitamin D ever? My answer is no. He works in a skyrise. He works in a building on a computer all day long. He doesn't see the light of the sun very often. He's not running around in a loincloth half naked on the beach. He's working at a computer station all day long, long busy days as an executive. Therefore, he likely cannot maintain his vitamin D level without very focused and intentional supplementation. Go to his omega check. Look at this right here. Let me do a quick poll. In the chat section, I want you to post if you have had fish 2 times in the last week. If you haven't, I want you to put the last time you had a fatty fish, because we're all good about eating chicken. Some people eat a fair amount of beef. Some people have a little bit of pork. A lot of people just don't love fish. His omega check level was at 4.8%, which is not good. It's high risk for neurodegenerative disease, and it's high risk for cardiovascular disease. He almost doubled his omega check with intentional supplementation. And I want to point out that if you go to the grocery store and you look for omega supplements, people try to vacillate between this thought process. Do I get the cheapest supplement because I'm going to be on a couple, or do I get the highest quality? And oftentimes individuals think the highest quality is attached to the highest price. I can tell you that it is not. You have to be very intentional about triglyceride-based supplements that have amplified dosing of EPA and DHA, and we've listed in that summary 3 potential options that people can take. They all have different price points, but they're phenomenal. Please be intentional about the type of omega you're taking. Otherwise, you're going to burp and it's going to smell like you just had fish for breakfast, or you're going to have an upset stomach because it has to be well absorbed and very well metabolized. It can't be an ethyl ester and reach that goal. Let's go to the next one. His magnesium level has always been pretty good. We didn't make any big recommendations. His copper and zinc and the associated ratio also have been very good, so I didn't make any recommendations. For some reason, his selenium level dropped. And some people would say, well, why did his selenium level drop? Selenium is a cofactor that's used in chemical reactions in the body to produce energy and to serve as an antioxidant. So when an individual has high levels of oxidative stress, you're going to be using more selenium. There's a sweet spot there. You remember when we looked at his glutathione, they range from 194 to about 250. Selenium is going to interplay within that ratio. And so we just want to keep him in the sweet spot, and he's a tad low. So I've recommended a new supplement. Let's go to his markers of metabolism: blood sugar, insulin, a HOMA-IR index, and his A1C. The only thing I'm going to mention is that he started good, and after 18 months, he got better. That's cool. He started at 5.4, then he went to 5.3 on an A1C. Now he's at 5.2. As a healthcare expert who's tracking people with metabolic problems like insulin resistance, prediabetes, oxidative stress, uric acid levels, all of these things play a role in metabolism, and I'm confident that this individual is making very intentional decisions about his diet, because as he ages, his A1C is going down. That is very uncommon in today's society. As we age, A1C goes up because of something called advanced glycated end products. He is intentional about his diet and his exercise because that has improved. It's so awesome to see that. In large part, that's a predictor of why he continues to do better, because he's thoughtful about what he puts in his mouth.
Can I just say one thing about that? I want to pull together why glycation and why your A1C actually matters. And it matters in a lot of different ways, but I think this brings it home for people. The more sugar is bound to a red blood cell, the less the oxygen carrying capacity is. And literally, the more glycation you have, the faster you are dying. We're all dying from the moment that we're born. The question is, how fast are we dying? And the more that sugar is just binding to tissues in the body, the harder it is for oxygen to circulate, the more likely it is that you're going to have neuropathy and that you're going to have different nerve signaling kinds of issues as you get older. So it makes a huge difference when A1C is going down like this instead of gradually increasing.
I would add to what Eric said. I have a little joke and a stupid ditty that I always leave with people. I want you to think about this. How many of you go to the gas station and change the fuel you put in your automobile every time you fuel up? Do you ever go in and just get a cheap root beer and put that in your gas tank because it's less expensive than unleaded or diesel? And the answer, of course, is no. But we're far less intentional about how we fuel our bodies. And so in the roadmap, we give options. I'm not a dogmatist. Like, people will say, Randy, do you eat keto? Are you a vegetarian? Are you a low carb, a mind diet, a Mediterranean guy? What's your style? And I tell people, well, this morning I ate keto because I had scrambled eggs with cheese. And this afternoon, I'm going to have a low carb because I'm going to have avocado toast while I'm on sourdough bread while I'm traveling here in Salt Lake City, right? Where my family's in at the restaurant now. You don't have to do the exact same thing every day and drive yourself crazy. You have to just be thoughtful, intentional about your diet. It's okay to let your hair down once in a while. It's also okay to be pretty freaking strict once in a while. And some of you need to be more strict, and some of you need to let your hair down a little bit and not let your diet run your life because it'll drive you crazy. Just be thoughtful about using whole, real, raw, organic, unprocessed foods. It will change your life. And so I've given examples of how to do that. Some people need a little more keto because their blood sugars are running high. Some people need a little bit more Mediterranean to keep their fats up. Some people are okay with low carb and occasionally a high carb diet because they're very heavy exercisers. There is no such thing as one size fits all. It has to be tailored to the individual. And I feel like that's one place we're really good at that at A Mind for All Seasons.
Yeah, just to comment on that, Randy, if you want to be 90% like strict with your diet, the metric on that is 2 cheat meals a week. 85%, 3 cheat meals. It's pretty straightforward, actually.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great example. And even when I would say there's a difference in cheat meals, oftentimes in my mind, a cheat meal is I might have some sourdough bread and maybe I'll have a piece of cheesecake. That's a cheat meal. Some people's cheat meal is an entire sleeve of Oreos and a half a gallon of ice cream. I don't think those cheats are on the exact same level. And I'm not saying I'm better than anyone else. I'm just saying be thoughtful about it. Don't make a cheat meal flush everything down the toilet, right? Just be thoughtful. Have a little snack if you want. It's not that big a deal. All right, let's go on. Cardiovascular markers. We check these because they are predictors of metabolic health. And I will tell you that I am focused on your triglyceride and your HDL and what that ratio is. Let me teach you how to think like a doctor. Take your triglyceride level and divide it by your HDL, and it gives you a ratio. That ratio should be less than 2. If it's less than 2, you're generally pretty metabolically healthy. So let's look at this individual. He's had 3 triglyceride levels of 101, 76, and 73, and his HDLs are 45, 42, and 42. It's pretty static. This tells me over 18 months, he's pretty consistent in how he eats, and his metabolic health hasn't changed much. And his ratio is right there hovering around the 2. Sometimes he's at 1.4, sometimes he's a little bit higher. He's been as high as 2.5. Again, we look at these as markers. I'm not going to lose my mind about a total cholesterol level just at the 200 mark or an LDL at 120. Some cardiologists want that LDL level less than 70. And I can tell you, patients don't have really good brain health when we push that cholesterol level that stinking low. So we have to look at the big picture. That's why I just lectured on preventive cardiology and not being too hyper-focused on just driving LDL into the toilet. Let's go on to the next one. In every roadmap, I give recommendations about smart supplements. You've all heard of smart drugs like Adderall or Concerta or Ritalin or methylphenidate or Focalin. These are prescription stimulants that kind of whip the brain into staying focused and having a better concentration. There are groups of supplements that have great research tied to them. And this is very standard in a roadmap, as I recommend a form of choline. One of my favorites is called acetyl CH active. Another favorite is Parasum. They have different price points by about $20. Anyone with a diagnosis of dementia is going to be, their doctors will likely use a medicine that increases choline in the brain. A great way to do that is to supplement with choline. The two other supplements are designed to modulate your vascular system, and one is an anti-inflammatory. You've all heard of curcumin. Some of you have heard of luteolin or quercetin or berberine or rutin. These are flavonoids that have been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier and cause an anti-inflammatory benefit. That supplement Neuroflam was formulated by Dr. Datis Karazian. He's got his PhD in immunology from Harvard, and I have spent hours with him. Physically, I sat across from him at our restaurant for 5 hours 2 weeks ago when I went to lecture. We talked about the research that goes into making supplements. These are great supplements. So if you think, well, I want to take curcumin, take a high dose of Neuroflam. I think there's some benefits to that sometimes are difficult to measure in a blood test, but they certainly fall into the category of smart supplements. Eric, would you add anything to that in the topic of nootropics?
I would simply add that when people are consistent in using something that's anti-inflammatory, we see benefit. And the key reason why comes down to the formula that many of you have heard us talk about before. And Randy and I didn't invent this formula. I think it was Dr. Bredesen who really first called it out and articulated it, but it's very much in line with what we've seen over the years and what other researchers are coming up with. The formula is IA over E, which stands for immune activation over energy production. And the idea is that when the immune system flares up, energy production drops. And anything that we can do that calms the immune response or increases energy production is going to have a significant benefit. So that's why we've helped many of you do things like red light therapy, because that directly stimulates energy production. Randy has been talking about specific supplements that calm the immune response and help it to kind of return to homeostasis. We need to have an immune response when it's called for, but if you have chronic inflammation, that's at the root of every major disease that there is. And it's difficult to measure some of that, but we see consistent results when we do that sort of thing.
And along that line, I'm going to revisit in an upcoming masterclass how you know if your brain is inflamed. And I want to give you another little ditty, another little Randyism. You will know that your brain is inflamed if you have a neurological symptom. So if you come to the table and say, Randy, I feel like I get brain foggy. How do I get rid of my brain fog? Randy, I have a headache periodically. Hey, Randy, I always feel like that I can't find my words, or I can't remember things that I typically recommended. That is a neurological symptom, and that is a predictor that your brain is inflamed. And I'm going to talk in more detail about how you identify neuroinflammation. That'll come in an upcoming lecture.
And I mental health symptoms as well. We've seen that over and over.
Yes, I agree. Depression, anxiety, lack of focus. Every young person that comes to me on ADD meds, I always say to them, well, would you like to talk about how we make your brain less inflamed? And they're like, well, how do you know my brain's inflamed? And I'm like, because you want Adderall. That's how I know. There's inflammation going on there. We can wrap that sucker up. We can fix that. We can work on that. Okay, in this next section, I talk about hormones. Your brain health is intricately linked to your hormone health. If you're menopausal, you likely are going to have brain fog because sex hormones are directly tied to neurological health. If your thyroid or testosterone or DHEA or pregnenolone levels are low, they're tied to brain health. So this is kind of interesting because, in my opinion, neither of these markers are in the optimal ranges. And as I've done telemedicine with this particular individual, I've nudged him a little bit. I'm like, hey, I wonder if you'd feel a little bit better if we optimized testosterone levels. This time he actually fell out of the range for TSH. He's always said to me, Randy, I'd like to be more conservative than aggressive. So as long as I keep making progress, I don't want to change these. I 100% accept that and respect that opinion. And look at what he's done. He's optimized other parameters and he's gone to the 99th percentile for his neurocognitive function. To me, this is an example that not everything has to be perfect to really start feeling better. This guy's doing really, really well. Maybe he functions best when his testosterone level's in the low 400s. There's a part of me that wonders if he'd function better if his testosterone was in the mid 700s. But that's a bridge we'll have to cross at a future consult. Okay, let's keep going. Look at these neurologically active hormones. So many people have never even heard of pregnenolone. That should not be confused with progesterone. They're different hormones. Pregnenolone is a very neurologically active hormone. And guess what? It comes from the precursor called cholesterol. You just heard me talk about, I don't want people to drive their cholesterol to the lowest levels possible because I can tell you their pregnenolone level will bottom out along with their cholesterol. And look at him. He started with a pregnenolone level of 12. An optimal range should be at least 100. He went from 12 to 34, and as we adjusted his pregnenolone, he went to 71. He is trending in the right direction. That's so beautiful. His DHEA levels, it's been pretty steady. 274, 227, and then at 214. DHEA is also very anti-inflammatory. There are case studies of people with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, who only chose to optimize DHEA and put their autoimmune diseases in remission because it's so anti-inflammatory. There isn't an upper threshold of safe. So I'm very conservative when I say, guys, your level needs to be above 150. I've seen research that says it should be 400 or greater. There is room to go up on this. So if this guy was always symptomatic and had a lot of problems, one challenge we could do is we could double his DHEA levels. And I'll tell you, it would probably make his testosterone go up maybe by about 25%, just raising his DHEA levels. This is very safe. It's over the counter. And like all other hormones, it's diminished with time. It's made primarily in the adrenal gland. So when people say, I wonder if I have adrenal fatigue, my next question is, well, what's your DHEA level? And if the DHEA level's low, then I can almost assuredly say, yeah, you do have a little bit of adrenal dysfunction. And then that example of cortisol, which is also an adrenal hormone, It's on the low side. We want that to be elevated in the morning and a little bit more suppressed at night. And he's certainly on the low end of that. And so having a nice antioxidant like the one or CoQ10 Supermax, these are great antioxidants. They're optional, but again, I made the statement that he's not perfect in every way. I brought this to the table because I didn't want you to think I'm cherry picking people who just have perfect levels on all categories and that's how they reach the high marks. No, he's been very intentional about his lifestyle. He's been very intentional about certain supplements, but he has not intentionality in some other areas. And so we just keep plugging away, but he's happy as a clam. Eric, let's
One of
keep
the
going.
things I would just throw in, just for context, because I've done enough one-on-ones with this guy to know he does not like the taste of the one. So he and I differ on that. I actually really like the taste of the one. I think it's kind of citrusy and woody, but to him, it's awful, and he does not take it very consistently. And so as soon as we identified, hey, Apex has a new product where there's enough crossover that it will probably have just as good an effect, he was like, man, sign me up for the pill because I don't like that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over time.
Yeah. Interesting that Eric said that. The one, I would say that most people don't like the taste. Eric's just a weirdo if he likes the taste of that because it's not that good. But the reality is, I can't tell you, most people, when they take a supplement, they want to take it and feel different. And that's tricky because there's some supplements you take and you don't feel different and you don't say, oh my gosh, that made a huge difference. I can tell you that of all the supplements, someone who's really foggy and takes the one a couple times a day for a couple of days will almost always come back and say, that stuff's magic. That stuff's freaking amazing. I love that. Now, they turn around and say, I don't like the taste, but it works. So, yeah, Eric, sorry, no offense that you like the taste of the one.
Oh, none taken. I am a weirdo.
So, a CRP, Eric, you passed that. Let's just go back. This is a marker of general inflammation. He's not inflamed. His body is not inflamed. These markers have been excellent. His AG ratio, same thing. His uric acid level, same thing. It's phenomenal. Sorry, you can see my family got back in the car, and so there's just a little bit of chatter here in the background. Let's go to this one right here. This is something that I've started adding into roadmaps. In February of 2025, I was contracted to do a head injury course with the Nurse Practitioner Association of Idaho, and I've now been contacted by the state of Utah to repeat that test. And I teach how to overcome head injuries. If you look at that pyramid, I just recently added this into the roadmap because most people, when they have a head injury, jump to the very top and they get vision and vestibular therapy. And they don't work on the ground level items that can make a big difference, starting with number one, understanding what makes the brain healthy. That's the enhanced protocol. That's what we do. We can't get a healthy brain without doing the underpinnings first. And then we work our way up the food chain until we actually do vestibular and vision therapy. Okay. His blood counts, I didn't even spend any time on those because he's done so well with those. Everything's normal. There isn't a whole lot to talk about in those areas. So our next telemedicine, the next thing I would ask him, there isn't a measurement for this, but I would ask him, tell me how often you're having headaches. Are they getting better? This individual told me when we met, I get headaches all the time. This is something I go to work and, oh, I just got to take a break, or I've got to use ibuprofen. I've got to take some caffeine because I get these headaches. This would be a really fun telemedicine discussion, and I've not visited with him since he did these labs. So I couldn't report on that, but I'm hoping that they get better. Lastly is you'll see in the roadmaps, I talk about the importance of toxicity testing. This individual went through the testing and we looked at his glyphosate levels. Glyphosate is that common weed killer called Roundup. It's sold as very innocuous. It's not dangerous. It's not toxic to the human body. Well, I can tell you it's not healthy. We're not looking to build this level in our body. And some individuals who play a lot of golf, or they do a lot of gardening, or they're just anal retentive about what their front yard looks like. So they're going to go spray all of the weeds in the front yard. These individuals that do this on a regular basis have very high levels of glyphosate. And even though he falls in the 99th percentile for neurocognitive index, he's made great strides. He better be very careful about glyphosate because he's almost in the 90th percentile. He does not want to be elevated on that level. And if Eric goes to the next one, his perchlorate level, which is another form of a chemical toxin in the human body, he's above the 95th percentile. So part of the things that we really want to do, we want him exercising. We want him moving his lymph. The lymph is how you clear toxins from your body. I would like it if he would use some nutritional supplements that help clear this. Glutathione is one of those, and his glutathione has had various levels. He would benefit from sauna therapy. If we could get him sweating on a regular basis, it could make a nice difference for him. And my goal for him over time is he recheck those levels at some point in time. So Eric, let's go to the very last section. It was just about alcohol, and you don't have to go there, but in this particular individual, he does not drink very often, but he drinks occasionally because he runs a business with executives, and executives like nightcaps at the end of meetings, so they'll go and have a little bit of alcohol. He says to me when he talks to me, I don't really like the taste of it. I don't really feel good at the end of it. It's hard because I don't know how to get out of it, right? It's kind of what you do. And I said, buddy, just drink a mocktail. Just go get a seltzer water and have them put an American flag or something in it. You can look the part, but you don't have to drink the alcohol. Anytime I can get people to diminish alcohol, we're diminishing toxins because alcohol intoxicates us. It's a neurotoxin. No level is good. I'm not judgmental. I don't think you're a bad person if you have a nightcap. I'm just telling you, if you want to optimize your neurological functioning, that becomes part of the discussion. You don't have to be perfect to have a great score, but you do have to be intentional about that. That kind of wraps up my summary about the roadmap.
Thank you, Randy, for walking us through that. And I want to just share one thing that I think is an additional bit of information. Based on what I'm seeing a lot of on social media these days, I think there's a general misunderstanding. And I actually felt strongly enough about it that I recorded a Caregiver Minute episode that went out today. If you're not familiar with the Caregiver Minute, it's a daily video that I've done for years. There's over 1,300 episodes. And I just share one tip about everything from brain science to how you take care of other people, how you take better care of yourselves. If you don't subscribe and you want to participate in that, just go to amindforallseasons.com/caregiver minute. But today's episode was all about the difference between oxidation and oxidative stress. And I want to point that out here because if we're not careful, people will get the wrong idea. Sometimes knowing too little about something can lead us down the wrong path. Oxidation and oxidative stress are not the same thing. Oxidative stress is when there's way too much oxidation going on and not enough reduction going on. So let's talk just a little bit about homeostasis and what that looks like at the cellular level. Back in high school AP chemistry, my teacher said, Leo the lion goes grr is the way that you remember the difference between oxidation and reduction. So Leo, L-E-O, reminds you that if you lose an electron, that is oxidation. And G-E-R is if you gain an electron, that is reduction. They are both important in the body, and what's necessary is for there to be balance. When you have a lot of free radicals floating around the body, free radicals are particles that have an extra unpaired electron. And so they're really eager to pair up with something. And if you lose an electron, that is oxidation. So when you have increased free radicals floating around the body, they're just scavenging around and there's more oxidative stress. Well, you need some free radicals, but you get a lot more free radicals when you have higher exposure to herbicides and pesticides, some of the things like Randy was just talking about in this client's case. Or if you're smoking cigarettes, there's going to be more free radicals. And so the balance tips and you end up with oxidative stress instead of a balance between oxidation and reduction. So hopefully that's starting to make sense a little bit. But even then, sometimes people think, oh my goodness, free radicals, they're evil. Well, that's not actually the case. Nitric oxide, which we've talked about a lot here, that's a free radical. And nitric oxide and other free radicals in the body actually send important signaling messages. So please don't take away from this the idea that, oh, if a little bit of antioxidants is good, a lot is better. We actually are trying to help people just maintain homeostasis. And if you swing too far one way or too far the other way, you can be in trouble. The problem and the reason why we use antioxidants is that there is a lot of additional sources of free radical damage, and we're trying to mitigate that. So just keep that in mind. I hope that's a little helpful bit of additional information here so that you don't go down the rabbit hole with some of the social media influencers out there that are not having a balanced discussion that's based on really some pretty basic chemistry. So, Randy, would you add anything to that?
What I would add is understanding the application of the chemistry that you just said. So you talked about oxidation and reduction, and people might be asking themselves, well, how in the heck do I know if I'm oxidizing and reducing anything? That doesn't mean anything to me. So here's how you know. If you feel like you're aging well, those are in balance. If you feel like I'm aging faster than the average person, like for example, when I go to dinner with my wife and someone says, hey, LaChere, are you with your father? Because I look 20 years older than she does, I have a lot of oxidative stress. The flip side of that is if you, and one other way you can tell is if you have a lot of illness. If you have autoimmune disease and you have Parkinson's disease and you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis and you've had 10 surgeries, I promise you that balance of oxidation and reduction is not very healthy. The sicker an individual is, the more oxidative problems they're having over time. So that's kind of how you know, okay, would I do well with an antioxidant challenge? Well, the sicker that you are, the answer is yes, you would do well. We have someone on our presentation today who was very, very sick for a period of time, had multiple hospitalizations, and I said, I want you to take trisomal glutathione a couple times a day for the next week or two. And the next time I talk to this individual says, I can't believe how much better I feel. And it's because that acute sickness just pushed that oxidative reduction process the wrong direction, and we had to bring it back into focus. Does that mean that we need to take these forever? Probably not in those doses. We can tone it down. But again, there's a lot that goes into that type of discussion. So Eric, that's just my way of trying to apply the science that you taught.
Yeah, I love that. I'll give you another quick application. I've told some of you this, but last summer, I started feeling really fatigued. And I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't changed my diet. I haven't changed my exercise. I'm still hydrating really well. So it's not a fuel problem. It's not a hydration problem. It's got to be an exhaust problem. The cellular engine's running a little bit dirty. What on earth is going on? And I thought about the fact there are massive forest fires in our area. Our city was just a soup of smoke, and I was breathing it every day. So I thought, oh, this balance, it's not at homeostasis anymore. I have a lot more free radical damage, a lot more oxidation going on. Therefore, I've tipped into actual oxidative stress. So to Randy's point, I took some trisomal glutathione, about 10 milliliters that morning when I realized this. And within 30 minutes, it was like someone flipped the switch on my energy. I felt amazing. And I did that every single day until those fires cleared out, and I felt remarkably better. So, from a practical standpoint, learning to ask these questions, but also learning to have an appreciation that it's not just about pouring on antioxidants willy-nilly. It's understanding how the cellular engine works and trying to return it to a balanced state.